NBC intelligence and national security reporter Ken Dilanian. Ken, what is the latest on this investigation? What have you heard? What does your reporting tell you? Where are we going, and how fast are we going there?
Well, Mike, to speak to your specific point on this statement and the meeting, my colleagues on the NBC News investigative unit have dug out the fact that the Mueller team is very interested in the president's role in crafting this statement from his son about this meeting. Because as you said, it has not proven to be accurate. I mean, it talked about this meeting being about a program of adoption. That's not what it was about at all, according to the participants. The only relationship it had to adoption was the Russian side came to talk about sanctions that were levied against various Russians that caused Vladimir Putin to ban the American adoption of Russian children. But there's no program of adoption. So Donald Trump himself was involved, according to the Washington Post, in dictating that statement that was put out on his son's behalf. And the special counsel is very interested in why he would want to disguise the actual purpose of that meeting, Mike.
To be clear, this was the statement that was drafted on Air Force One, was it not?
That's right. On the way back from Germany, the president was returning from a G20 meeting, and his advisors had said, look, let's get everything, let's go get everything out that we know about this meeting and just tell the truth about it. And the president decided to take things into his own hands, according to the Washington Post, and dictate this very specific statement, which has not been borne out. And this meeting, let's not forget, at Trump Tower back in June 2016, between a Russian lobbyist, a Russian lawyer with links to the Kremlin, and Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort, this meeting goes to the heart of what the special counsel is investigating, which is whether the Trump team was colluding in any way with Russia's attempt to interfere with the election. Because after all, this meeting was taken with a promise of help from the Russian government to the Trump campaign. There were emails that came through to Don Trump Jr. from this guy, Rob Goldstone, a music promoter, on behalf of some Russian oligarchs with ties to Putin, who said, hey, we have some dirt on Hillary Clinton this lawyer would like to transmit to you. And that's why the meeting happened. And that's one of the reasons the Mueller team is so interested in it, Mike.
Mark Leibovich is still with us, I hope. Are you still with us, Mark?
Still
he
here,
is.
Mike.
There he is. I can see him right there. So, Mark, you've spent time with the president before he was elected president of the United States. You've spent considerable time with him. You did a terrific magazine piece on him. His sense of family, his sense of trust in his family, his sense of just having a small circle of people who he does trust. How strong is that, and what role would it have played, if any, in the drafting of this statement on behalf of Donald Trump Jr.?
Well, I mean, I think again and again he's proven that the one entity he is pretty much unfailingly loyal to is his family. I mean, he does keep a very tight circle, and obviously there's no one tighter than his blood relatives, or I guess in the case of Jared Kushner, his son-in-law. I think what's interesting about this is I'm sort of interested in Mueller's sort of looking at something that's sort of in a public space. I mean, essentially, Donald Trump has been caught in a falsehood, it would seem to me, between what the statement here says and what the full story of the meeting is. It's one of what's been many falsehoods that he has been caught in his public statements since, certainly since his presidency began, certainly since his campaign began. I mean, this is a standard operating procedure for him. The curious thing for me is that Mueller is now looking at this as it relates to Russia. And at what point does spin, if not distortion, fall under the rubric of obstruction of justice? I mean, obviously, the statement that the president dictated was not going out to just a small specific, party. This was going out to the public. And I mean, White Houses have misled the public in some way, or at least shaded the truth in some way for years. The question is this part of a larger obstruction of justice case that Mueller is looking into, and how deeply, and what questions are they asking?
Clint, you've worked in the building. You're a former FBI agent. What line is there? What bar is there for an obstruction of justice charge? Does this sort of meet it? Does it meet it?
It gets close, but generally what you're looking for is evidence tampering. You're telling someone to destroy or not reveal evidence that's being requested, or you're trying to change the situation or essentially suppress people from providing testimony. This isn't quite there because it's a public statement, and ultimately the emails did come out. Don Jr., went ahead and published those. But what is problematic about it is he deliberately got involved on behalf of his his son. I mean, this is illustrative of why you don't put family businesses in the White House. In the military, we don't put family members in the same units for these exact same reasons. It clouds your judgment and it makes you choose between family and your country. So we don't do those things. I think what it will ultimately lead to, though, is why did he move forward, particularly in this instance, and try and change the narrative around this incident? Does he know about this meeting from beforehand? He claims he didn't, but maybe he did. How many other times has this happened? And if you can start with a pattern, that leads to questioning, that leads to evidence gathering. I think that's probably the first step they're trying to take right now.
Generally, in the White House, though, generally you take the principal, take the president, and just put him somewhere else, and don't tell them everything that's going on because of these exact things. And clearly, his aides either didn't do that or tried to do it, and he wouldn't listen. So that could go to the pattern that Donald Trump doesn't listen.
Probably the latter.
Right.
But Ken, do we have a sense, an idea of who else was in and out of the presidential cabin on Air Force One while he was drafting that statement? Who he spoke to while he was drafting that statement?
I don't have that reporting, Mike, but I wanted to make the point that I've spoken to legal experts about why Mueller is interested in this, and it's not necessarily that it's a crime to have lied to the American public, as Mark pointed out. It's more a consciousness of guilt issue. When prosecutors look to see whether someone has covered something up, it's an indication that they thought there was something worth covering up, and it's a red flag for what happened at that meeting and the implications of that meeting. Because if everything was kosher about that meeting, then why did the president just say, let it all hang out? Let's just say what happened. But instead, he put out a misleading statement about
Mike, to your question about who was in the cabin, Vanity Fair just came out with a really interesting long read about Jared and Ivanka Trump, and that